Hello, everyone, and welcome to everyone joining around the world. Thank you for joining us today in this special next installment in the Panasonic Veterans Business Impact Group Professional Development Guest Speaker Series. My name is Chérie Johnston, and I am the president of the Veterans Business Impact Group for the Panasonic North American companies. Although I personally am not a United States veteran, I've been around the US military for the past 29 years, originally through my marriage to a US Marine in the early 90s, who went on to complete 20 years of service and retired in 2012. Also, it's been my honor and privilege to serve as the CEO of a military support nonprofit our son founded 13 years ago in 2010. Lastly, I'm a community partner to the US Army, which permits me to speak to the American public about all of the excellent career, educational, and life opportunities available in the US Armed Forces. Additionally, both my father and my father-in-law served as US Marines. My father-in-law later went on to become a naval officer, retiring after decades of service. We told our son, since your father and both of your grandfathers were US Marines, serving combined over 50 years to our nation, we felt he was safe to select any other profession, but he chose to support the Department of Defense still by working as an aerospace engineer. I'd first like to take a moment to thank all of our Panasonic veterans who have served in the United States military. Thank you. Also, to say thank you to those who have served their respective nations and foreign militaries around the globe, we would like to formally recognize your service as well. The Veterans BIG objective is to bring our employees together through networking, mentorship, and community engagement, while leveraging our own unique military experience and leadership skills to foster better collaboration within Panasonic's workforce. Further, to recognize our community of employee veterans, alongside the family and friends of military veterans who support and encourage one another through our shared experiences. By bringing together our unique backgrounds of military service, leadership, and dedication, we hope to capitalize on these strengths to better serve our companies, communities, and customers through veteran recruitment activities, career development, professional growth, and retention. If you are a US veteran, please reach out to me directly to self-identify and become part of our official Panasonic veteran community. During the discussion, I'll place my email address in the chat. Also, please know that our organization is open to all employees. Anyone interested at all in learning more may participate with whatever time you have available to contribute. As I previously shared with our special guest, based on my own personal experiences, originally surrounded only by the Marine Corps, I had very little exposure to the US Army. However, through my volunteer work in support of Army families, I quickly fell in love with the US Army, both its unique military culture and getting to know the patriotic Army soldiers and their families. Thus, of all the guest speakers that we've been honored to host and engage with during the past year at Panasonic, certainly today's speaker is by far the most accomplished. It's a prestigious honor that he has decided to share the next hour with Panasonic. Lieutenant General Michael Lamore Howard officially started his career as a military officer in the US Army in 1986, first beginning as a rifle platoon leader and scout platoon leader. Ultimately, he not only trained to become one of our nation's elite Ranger Special Forces, but also went on to lead military commands both in peacetime and in war. Further, General Howard is a paratrooper, which means he chose to voluntarily jump out of perfectly fine aircraft. The general soon found himself stationed in Germany, then forward deployed to the war conflict Operation Desert Shield, Storm, inside Iraq, which the rest of us merely watched at the time live on CNN. Following, the general served in multiple commands and leadership roles within the 75th Ranger Regiment, and by the year 2000, he was serving in the Plans and Policy Directorate of the Joint Special Operations Command. Again, for those of us who are civilians, this is the command where they plan the exciting types of missions that we only see at the movies. In 2003, he would take command of the 1st Battalion, 87th Infantry Regiment, 1st Brigade Combat Team, 10th Mountain Division Light Infantry, and deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom to the nation of Afghanistan. To follow were repeated deployment combat tours among various commands with ever-increasing leadership roles and responsibilities. In 2010, he was assigned to the NATO headquarters in Belgium for 2 full years. General Howard later would become the Director of Force Management in the Office of the Deputy Chief of Staff in Washington, D.C., which is our nation's capital. Next, he assumed command of the Joint Force Headquarters of the National Capital Region and the U.S. Army Military District of Washington, where he served alongside the United States President and Vice President in welcoming countless world leaders at both ceremonial and diplomatic events. In full circle, General Howard returned a few years ago to Germany, and at present is serving as the Deputy Commanding General of the U.S. European Command during a time of incredible conflict within the European continent. As evidenced, I personally have known and worked with thousands of U.S. soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and even Guardians now. Thus, I can state with absolute credibility that General Howard is one of America's finest warriors that I've had the privilege to meet. His rise to the top echelon of his career field is self-evident. I believe that it's his life and career are probably likely the best story yet to be told. The more I've learned about the general's military career, the more fascinated I personally have become with his place in U.S. military history for over 3.5 decades. Our discussion today, is leading with fortitude, diplomacy, and valor. The word fortitude is defined as mental and emotional strength in facing difficulty, adversity, or danger courageously. I felt that this word truly summarized the character of the gentleman that we'll be hearing from soon. Very few of us as individuals will ever find ourselves in life or death circumstances where we are tested to the fundamental core values of who we are as a person. However, not only do General Howard's many medals indicate he passed through such unimaginable, intense, circumstantial tests, but the number of medals he has obtained indicate that he's done so time and time again. For example, the Bronze Star Medal with 4 oak leaf clusters means that he has earned the Bronze Star Medal 5 times in total. Unfortunately, despite my best efforts, I'm still unable to share the details of those awards with you today. However, I can tell you that within Panasonic Avionics, our veterans team had an entire discussion already based on the significance of his having achieved just this 1 medal alone, and General Howard possesses a laundry list of additional medals. The fact that he was selected as America's most elite to move forward and represent the nation at its highest level, both in protocol ceremonies and diplomatic relations among nations, it's only further indication of the confidence and trust our nation's top leadership has bestowed upon him based on a lifetime of career achievements. Today's an extra special honor for Panasonic because General Howard will be retiring this summer following 36 years of service. For me, it's really hard to imagine he's actually not that much older than I am, that he'll now be able to enjoy the rest of his days in a well-earned retirement bliss. And without further delay, I'll turn the floor over to Lieutenant General Howard. Welcome, sir.
Ms. Johnson, thank you, and thank Panasonic for having me, and thank you for the kind introduction. I know myself much, much better than you know me, so I can tell you for sure that the comments you just made were overly generous and actually slightly outrageous. Some of those pictures I haven't seen in years. So ladies and gentlemen, I know the audience is full of veterans. Thank you all so much for your service. It's really an honor for me to address this group today, or tonight for me. So my plan is to talk for about 20 minutes, just a little bit about myself, but more about leadership challenges and leadership lessons that I've encountered in the past 36 years. I'll avoid war stories about myself and stick to just some general broad observations. And I hope that my remarks will generate some tough questions from you for me, which I do look forward to answering if I can. As Ms. Johnson said, I'm Mike Howard. I'm Lieutenant General of the United States Army. I grew up in Georgia. My mother was a secretary, father worked in a chemical plant. Both were very demanding and very good role models for me. Before starting in the chemical plant, my father was a soldier for just a few years. He didn't graduate from high school, but he earned his GED in the Army. And because of my dad's education path, he was super hard on me and my brother about doing well in school. So after high school, I went to a local community college, and then from there to Mercer University in Macon, Georgia, where I got my 4-year degree. So Dad was a soldier, but that's not why I joined the Army. The truth is I needed college money. So in 1983, I accepted a ROTC scholarship, and then in 1986, I graduated from Mercer and was commissioned an Army officer in the infantry. At the time, my goal was to serve my 4-year educational commitment, to pay for my scholarship, and then get out of the Army and be a doctor. So obviously that didn't happen. I'm not a doctor, I'm a soldier. Two things changed the path I was on. The first is that in the Army, I learned what real job satisfaction was. I mean, I worked for very, very talented leaders. I had great colleagues. I was challenged. And really for the first time professionally, I felt valued in the workplace. So I wasn't as quick to chase med school any longer as I was earlier in life. So that's the first reason. The second reason is all these wars started. And let me tell you, it's hard to walk away from military service in the middle of a war. Anyway, 36 years later, here I am, still a soldier. So my 36 years, I've served, as Ms. Johnson said, in infantry units and soft units, and in, some senior staffs. I served in Georgia, North Carolina, Washington State, Kansas, New York, Alaska, and Washington, D.C. Overseas in Afghanistan, Kuwait, and Iraq, the Balkans, Germany, and Belgium. Total, I spent 16 years outside the continental United States during my Army service. Blessed to lead soldiers at every rank I've held in peacetime and combat. And I'd love to tell you that I had a plan for my career that was mapped out, but that's just not the case. I really took a day at a time. Seemed like every time a job ended with the Army, there was another job waiting. If I could change my path, honestly, I don't think I would. I'd probably try to do a lot better at the jobs I had. I'd try to be a better leader. I think those are things we all strive to do all the time anyway, but I'm not sure I'd change the path. So that's really enough about me. I think Chérie said quite enough about me. Let me shift gears now and talk about some leadership challenges and some lessons I've learned in my time in the Army. In the Q&A, I'd love to hear how you think these do or do not intersect with your professional lives or your experiences in industry. I'd love to hear where you think there are parallels. So the first challenge I want to tell you about is the challenge of a brand new infantry officer in his first job as a second lieutenant. And typically new lieutenants are assigned to an infantry platoon of about 40 soldiers. And in that position, they are, despite being brand new, they are the senior ranking person in the platoon, the most educated in the platoon, have the most responsibility, and they're the highest paid in the platoon. Yet this brand new lieutenant is the least experienced person in that unit. Many of the junior ranking soldiers and all of the NCOs have more time, non-commissioned officers, have more time in the Army than this new lieutenant. The new lieutenant, however, is expected to exercise his authority to make good decisions the minute he takes over, but the fact is new lieutenants have very little experience to base their decisions on when they first arrive. Often soldiers are concerned, somewhat reasonably, that a new lieutenant doesn't have the skills to lead them successfully in combat. Compounding this concern or this trust issue is the fact that many of the sergeants in the platoon have combat experience. And this combat gives them credibility that this second lieutenant just does not have. Some soldiers resent the new lieutenants. They're so young, yet they receive a good wage. They have more responsibility than everybody else. In the soldier's mind, how is this fair? So I've observed many young officers over the years, hundreds literally, navigate this challenge. The arrogant know-it-alls, they fail, and they fail quickly. But most do fairly well. And they do this by being humble, by being good listeners, by picking mentors that help shape how they lead. The good ones lead by using the advice of their sergeants and their peers in their decision making until they have the experience of their own to shape their own decisions. I really suspect there's some parallels in business between a young, well-educated, white-collar professional and a blue-collar colleague that's been in a company, for years. And I look forward to discussing that if it's of interest. The second challenge I want to discuss is leading soldiers in combat. So getting soldiers to operate at the extreme edge of their mental and physical capability day after day is hard. Getting them to do very, very dangerous things safely is hard. Getting soldiers that are suffering from just numbing levels of fatigue and they're underweight, homesick, frankly, scared is quite difficult. Motivating a soldier to fight the day after they've lost a friend, that takes really, really skilled leadership. So I have more than 6 years in combat, and I've seen tremendous leaders work through this. Those that succeeded in this situation or in this environment were able to inspire confidence in soldiers, generally by demonstrating empathy and poise and their own confidence. So they possessed empathy that, in my mind, that they could sense when a soldier or a unit needed a counselor or needed a day off or needed both. In terms of poise and confidence, probably the most effective technique I've seen leaders use sort of to get through this type of situation is a technique called leadership through presence. The idea is that if a senior leader is confident enough to be present for a very, very dangerous event, then soldiers are more confident that everything is going to be okay. To be clear, I'm not talking about the leaders in the unit. I'm talking about senior guys, much more senior than those in the unit. And I wonder that if I replace these combat conditions I'm describing with, very, very stressful conditions sometimes seen in the business world, that we could draw parallels. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts on that if you think we can. The third challenge I'd like to quickly discuss is associated with operating in a multinational military environment. So I've worked quite a bit with the Afghan Army and with NATO militaries. The problems I've seen arise are centered around the lack of mutual respect and a lack of understanding of a colleague's views. The most common version of this challenge is when a well-intentioned junior U.S. service member that's trying to solve a problem with an international colleague, offends his colleague by insisting that the U.S. advice he's presenting is what's best for that international colleague, dismissing his views because they didn't match what the young service member was taught in his U.S. course or his U.S. training. In reality, what's important is the outcome we want, not necessarily how we get to the outcome. Now sure, the method or the modality that we as U.S. military use or that we coach should be legal and it should be ethical. I'm not saying there's no boundaries, but insisting on a U.S. method, a path, or procedure often gets us nowhere. When if we focused on an end state or an outcome and we would have shown or could show flexibility in our methodology or our modality, we can really get some stuff done. I've seen senior leaders make some similar mistakes when operating at really high levels of the military. In this case, slightly different. The leader fails to recognize the importance of the international colleagues' national interests and the impact of domestic political factors on their decision making. U.S. military leaders, U.S. national leaders, they make decisions based on our national interests, and our international colleagues do exactly the same thing. And our decisions are affected by our domestic factors. We in the United States often find alignment with nations that have common values with us, that have similar economic circumstances or models to our nation. We find alignment with nations with similar governments. But where we find the most alignment is when we have, when our national interests align from nation to nation. This seems really simple, but we don't always remember this. So the leaders that I've seen avoid this challenge and effectively operate with international colleagues are those that are, just the most respectful and humble. friendly folks that show mutual respect, and they make friends with their colleagues, and they genuinely look for where interests intersect versus trying to pressure a colleague to adopt a U.S. position, whether it aligns or not. I suspect that in a large international company like the one you're all working with, that you may have seen some similar situations, and I look forward to your thoughts on this if that's of interest. So the fourth challenge I'd like to discuss is the tyranny of the like-minded inner circle. So this one's really dangerous. Leaders of large military organizations have inner circles, either formally or informally. And this is the group of people that we turn to for advice when we're going through the decision-making process. My observation is that the best leaders intentionally have a diverse inner circle. And by diverse, I mean diversity of views, diversity of perspective. My observation is also that in some organizations, as the stress increases, and in the case of my organization, stress sometimes includes danger, the size of the inner circle decreases. The diversity of thought in the inner circle decreases, and the need for validation of our decision increases. The result is often poor decisions based on confirmation bias of a small, like-minded, non-diversity of thought inner circle. The best leaders avoid this. And there's a couple of simple steps that I've seen the best leaders use to avoid this. The first is just being aware of the tyranny of the like-minded inner circle and the power of debate. Debate takes time, and I got that. It slows things down. I understand that. Muddies the water, sometimes confuses the issue. But in my opinion, well-debated decisions are far better than snap ones. The second step is having and using a disciplined decision-making process. When times are tough, when stress and danger increase, decision-making will only work if decision-making processes will only work if you've been using them all along. The military has a decision-making process. Units that practice it and use it all the time, it works well in stressful situations. Units who don't practice it until there is stress, until there's a crisis, usually do not. Finally, the best leaders are the ones that are the most transparent. It's not enough to allow rigorous debate. That alone is not good enough. The organization, not just the inner circle, has got to know that the debate is ongoing and that their interests are being entered into the conversation. There's a followership component to this as well that's worth mentioning. So debate can't go on forever. Once the debate is complete and the decision is made, good followers need to execute dutifully. Organizations that are not transparent with their team rarely get to this point. They rarely get to the point where they can execute. If the team doesn't know how the debate and the decision-making process are proceeding, they're likely to want to litigate decisions indefinitely. And hence the importance of transparency with the organization, the larger organization, in the decision-making process. If this resonates, I'm interested in talking about it when we get to Q&A. A couple quick thoughts about mental health fitness of the force. It's no secret that the U.S. military struggles with this. It manifests itself in PTSD cases, suicidal gestures, unfortunately sometimes in completed suicide. Much of this is caused by combat experience. However, some of it's caused by poor leadership and poor workplace environments. We, military leaders, are coached from very early times in our careers to look for certain warning signs: failed relationships, money problems, substance abuse, poor performance at work. And this is really good advice, actually. It has served me well, and we've identified, and my subordinate leaders have identified many people who needed help using these warning signs. But these warning signs alone are not enough. And here's why. In the military, there's a significant part of the force that gets missed because they're high performers, because they don't have money problems, they don't have failed relationships, they don't have substance abuse problems, but they still have mental health challenges. Unfortunately, we usually don't find out about these people until it's too late. I know that really the only true way to identify a person like this that may be struggling, a high performer with no warning signs, is to ask. One of the most helpful questions is simply, how are you doing? Or how is your family doing? But for a question like that to be answered, there's got to be mutual trust. There's got to be mutual respect, and building that takes time, and I know that. I've seen a lot of leaders deal with mental health proactively in their organizations. No surprise, these are the people that can establish real trust with subordinates and mutual respect. I mean, like real relationships that are deeper than attending the same staff meeting occasionally a couple times a month and a quarterly performance review. Leaders that took the time to build a strong team. So building strong teams is not free. It costs, you know. It costs in terms of time spent away from the primary mission. It costs in terms of leader bandwidth. Sometimes it costs money. Sometimes it costs in terms of leaders' time away from their own families to put on these kind of events. But the payback is huge, and it usually reduces the amount of time soldiers are away from the job, the amount of time they struggle with situations like we're talking about, and it definitely improves the command's climate. So I suspect this is something that's relevant to industry, and if it is and you have questions about it, I'd love to hear your questions. I'm approaching my 20-minute mark, so I'm going to talk fast here. It's just 2 more points. Being adaptable in the armed forces is crucial. I'm not talking just about tactical adaptability or operational adaptability. I'm talking about strategic adaptability. There is no way that what we did yesterday will be good enough for tomorrow in terms of our training, our doctrine, and our stuff, our equipment. Our adversaries adapt, and so must we. If we don't adapt, we're not going to win the next war. Our adversaries really paid attention to Desert Shield and Desert Storm, and they adapted. We learned some major lessons in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and our adversaries in Iraq paid attention to Afghanistan. Our adversaries in Afghanistan paid attention to Iraq. Now, we're watching the Ukrainian and Russian conflict closely to see what's working well and what is not working well. Here's the kicker about adaptation. Often the worst offenders, those least able to adapt, are the winners in the war. Losers are ready to change. They don't want to remain losers. Looking in the rear view mirror at a war has its place. We should look backwards to see what our adversaries did well and what we did poorly. Unfortunately, all too often we look in the rear view mirror and we see what we did well and what our adversaries did poorly. Some military leaders get so comfortable being good at what they do or what they did in the last war, and they're so uncomfortable with change, with innovation, experimentation, adaptation, modernization. And you know, these things come with risk. You can fail and you can waste a lot of money as you're innovating. It's not, you know, you're trying new things, and many people don't want to take that risk. And so they freeze in time and they become irrelevant. They're good for a short period of time, but then eventually they become irrelevant. Some nations' militaries do this, and those are the militaries that eventually will start losing wars. A final thought on this. Some of our most innovative people are our youngest soldiers. I mean, these are the brightest and the freshest minds. They're out-of-the-box thinkers. You know, successful, self-confident commanders empower these youngsters. Some, however, are intimidated by them, and so they suppress them. These guys are going to lose. It's just a matter of time. I suspect there are some parallels, you know, in the innovation discussion between the military and industry, so I'm interested in your thoughts. Final point, quick word about valor. I've seen a fair amount of combat, and I've observed valor on the battlefield. I had a platoon sergeant move under fire 3 times to rescue a wounded soldier. He earned a Medal of Honor for that, but it cost him his life. A company commander in an adjacent unit to mine moved under fire to rescue a wounded Afghan soldier. It cost him his life. A young medic in a company in my brigade, in Afghanistan, moved countless wounded soldiers from a location where they were under fire to safety. And he was wounded when he was doing all this. I could go on. There's so many examples. Common to all of these is what motivated the soldiers. It wasn't the training, although I think the training helped. Certainly it helped. It wasn't the desire to accomplish the mission, although I am sure they wanted to do that. That's not why they risked their lives. And it wasn't to get promoted. You know, the thought process was not, if I risk my life, I'll get promoted first or faster. Rather, these soldiers were motivated by the bond between each other, by their respect and their love that they had for each other. They just have this intense desire not to let their fellow soldier down. Now, valorous acts aren't the only great things that happen in units that have this strong teamwork. There's all kinds of excellence that's prevalent in many areas of an organization that has this strong of a bond. I suspect this is true in industry as well, and I'd love to hear your views on it. Okay, I'm about 30 seconds over, and Ms. Johnston is checking her watch, so I'm going to stop here. I truly look forward to your questions. Over to you.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Howard. Thank you. That was wonderful, and just truly appreciate hearing your wisdom and your thoughts on everything. I do have actually a series of planned questions that I would like to kick off with, but also I would welcome everyone. Please, I see we already have one question that's in the chat. Please go ahead and just drop your questions in there, and we will publish them as quickly as possible and get to those next. And we're hoping that we can keep the general as long as possible to get through them. So specifically, your career with the U.S. Army has carried you through several historical armed conflicts and wars. In fact, you personally have served forward deployed multiple times, as you shared, leading troops in combat areas. Will you speak to the key lessons that you've learned from carrying just that austere level of responsibility for the lives of others?
And you're talking combat lessons, right?
Yes, sir.
Combat, I think. Wow, there's a lot of them. Okay, so here's one. So toxic leadership. Toxic leadership, I think, is present in the military, it's present in industry, it's present in government. Everyone hates it. In the military, work very hard not to allow it, and here's why. Unquestionably, toxic leaders get things done. Now, everybody's miserable and they hate the leader, but they get things done. In peacetime, it's effective. However, in combat, when your soldiers are more afraid of dying than they are of that leader, it doesn't work anymore. And that leader's authority is gone. He can't effectively lead in combat. So it doesn't work in combat, so we work very hard not to allow it in peacetime. The other reason we work hard is because nobody likes that kind of person in your organization, but the operational reason, it is ineffective leadership in combat. The second one is, combat leaders like your organization have objectives that have to be accomplished. And I get that. It's important. There's no question. Focusing on objectives and on metrics and, measuring folks against outputs, that yields success, and that's time tested. And I agree with that. However, I think that if you really want to shatter the records, in addition to doing all that, you got to focus a substantial amount of your time on your people, on their professional needs, on their personal situations, on their success. Soldiers don't fight for objectives or metrics or any of that stuff. They fight because they have a bond with their leaders and their fellow soldiers, and they don't want to let each other down. Maybe one more. You got me going now. Sorry. As a leader in combat, you have to have people around you that will tell you when you're headed in the wrong direction. Somebody has to have permission to tell you no. The stress is too high, and there's too many times when you're tired and hungry and cold and wet and scared. And yeah, you have to be willing to listen. You just can't do this alone. It's impossible. The minute that you blow somebody in place because they disagree with something you're saying, you and your organization are going to start making mistakes because people won't tell you the truth. They'll simply say whatever they can to avoid your wrath. The stakes are too high for combat, so you just can't operate that way. Somebody has got to be able to say no to you, and you've got to allow it. I hope that was helpful.
So further to that, that same question. You mentioned it, right? When people are working under those extreme circumstances, like they're frightened, confused, or just literally demotivated at that point, how do you still pull everyone together and get them moving in that same direction forward and thriving, actually succeeding at it?
I think it starts before you ever get to combat. I mean, the training that you do before you go to combat is, if you don't do that right, then you're not going to be able to get them going in the same direction. So I think training before they deploy is super important. Maybe equally important is a leader. You got to be present. You can't lead from the other end of a radio. You have to be there when things are really, really horrible. Senior leaders have got to be there, and that has a calming effect that is necessary to keep forward momentum going. Over.
Okay, so we're switching areas now. So specific to EUCOM, your European U.S. command where you work, you're now leading near the top of one of the world's largest military commands at the crossroads of the greatest military conflict to shake Europe in nearly 8 decades now. The first part of this question, it's a two-part question. How has the mission evolved today from where you started just a few years ago when you were assigned to Germany in terms of the multinational cohesion? And second to that, as a leader, how do you navigate the countless conflicting political agendas, personal motivations, cultural disparities of so many individuals in order to progress the actions forward you need to accomplish?
That is one heck of a question, so it's going to take a little time. So in terms of the evolution of the mission and the evolution of cohesion, let me address that first. So in terms of evolution of the mission, before 2014, EUCOM focused on security cooperation. I mean, we helped the nations of Europe, we have helped the nations in the NATO alliance and some partners of the alliance strengthen their military. That was the focus. After 2014, the headquarters returned to a focus on being a warfighting headquarters. Once again, we focused on the defense of the NATO alliance. In terms of the evolution of cohesion, I haven't seen NATO as cohesive since the Cold War as it is now. And cohesion of the alliance takes a lot of work. And I mean, nations have national interests, and different countries on the continent have different worries. Turkey has concerns about the PKK on its border with the Middle East, and the southern nations have a concern with immigration, and the nations in the east are concerned about conflict with Russia. The one thing right now that the entire NATO alliance is focused on and concerned with is the Ukraine-Russia war. It really has been incredibly unifying. Again, I haven't seen the alliance as cohesive since the Cold War. In terms of keeping everybody heading in the direction, so there's several parts of this as well. First, the debate is healthy. It is healthy. It's hard to do, but I think it's vital. Too many like-minded people, as I just said a minute ago, surrounding our decision makers, that drives groupthink and poor decision making. So even though debating is an issue is slow, it's important. Healthy debate increases, another reason it's important, it increases buy-in. When the entire organization participates in the decision making, then and even if the decision isn't perfect for everybody, it increases buy-in. So that's the first part of the second part of the answer. The second thing, depending on what type of organization you have, the way you keep everybody going in the same direction is a little bit different. It's a mixture of directive leadership and collaborative leadership, right? So in my internal headquarters, I try not to use directive leadership, but sometimes have to. But I would rather use collaborative leadership. In the interagency, our U.S. interagency, one agency is always designated as the lead federal agency, and the other agencies fall in line. We can't tell each other what to do. This is collaborative leadership. Now, the NSC can, the National Security Council can, but they don't usually do that because the different agencies in the federal government work together. So that's collaborative leadership. In a multinational environment, it is absolutely 100% collaborative leadership. There's 30 nations in NATO, and not one of those nations can tell the other what to do. We can inform them, we can suggest things, we can work together, but it's all collaborative leadership, and it's necessary to, as you said, keep us all working in the same direction. Final thought, it's sort of along the line of this question, and that's political debate in the United States. This is one area where the military doesn't work to keep everybody going in the same direction. Our military is apolitical. It's expected to be apolitical, and we are very serious about being apolitical. I think the worst thing that could happen to our democracy is for the military to try to influence our elected leaders in the political sphere. We don't do it, and we police our own. When we catch one of our own doing this, then we take care of that ourselves. That was a very long answer to your very long question, Ms. Johnson. Did I get everything you wanted?
Yes, thank you. You definitely did it justice. Thank you, sir. So on to the next question. What challenges does the United States face moving forward that keeps you awake at night? That you foresee the next generation of the U.S. military encountering, or your children's generation grappling with?
Nothing keeps me awake at night. But there are things that are going on in the world that worry me. Terrorism's never going to go away. It's been around forever, and it will be around forever. So it'll have to be managed forever. Some newer things. Cyber is an emerging area of concern. Both nation-state capabilities and non-state actors is an area of concern. Space and counter space capability is improving in some countries around the world. That's of concern, and our nation will have to spend some time, resources, thinking about that and working on that. And probably the other one is the growing number of nations that have nuclear weapons. It's not a small number anymore. It's getting larger, and so the chance of having a nuclear exchange will go. The more there are on the Earth, the more there's a chance of that happening. I guess those are the big ones, Ms. Johnson.
Truthfully, having a front row seat to so much of the United States, but also world history, meeting and working with our United States presidents and multiple presidents, for that matter. Have you had those moments of deep reflection, wondering how your career arrived at that incredible crossroad? And potentially maybe surreal, or are you just still so busy in your day-to-day focus of your mission that you're just saving all of that up for retirement?
Probably the latter. I mean, I don't take myself that seriously, so a day at a time. Opportunities have just been presented to me. I haven't really pondered it in deep thought. Maybe someday I will. I haven't yet. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for your candor, at least on that one. We'll give you some time to think about that later. So this is my last planned one, and then I promise I'll jump over to our audience because we have a lot of questions coming in. So what sage leadership wisdom do you share with someone looking to rise to the height of their career field, be it as a military officer, as a manager, director, or someone who wants to be a CEO within industry? What's your advice?
I think the most important thing a leader in any organization has to do is take care of their people, and that's not cliche. If you take care of your people, the people will take care of the organization. There's other things: being humble, being friendly, being competent, working hard. Those are all really important as well. But the way you treat people that's what's going to determine whether people leave your organization at a high rate, whether they work hard, whether they do things extra when nobody's looking, or they do the minimum. That would be my my advice.
Well, thank you. Thanks for being patient with all those questions. So I have some new ones coming in for you. And I'm going to lead off with Command Master Chief Alan Banks, retired. And so he's asking, what tips would you give industry leaders on how to lead from the front?
You know, honestly, I think some of the things I've already said. I think being present at very, very stressful times to help bring calm to the chaos is important. I think building strong teams is important. Really strong teams, so that you understand people. You understand when they're struggling. You understand when things are fine. But, you know, intercepting someone that's struggling early is important. I'd say the biggest one I still believe is you treat your people right. You really, really take care of them. You really learn them. They're going to take care of the organization. And I think that's probably true in any organization.
Excellent.
Over.
Excellent. So this is first, thank you for your incredible service. Can you please speak to what the military is doing to address the workforce pipeline? This is an issue that we in industry are dealing with, especially in the aerospace industry. That's at my particular company, where there is less of a feed from the military as in prior years.
So is the question about the pipeline from the military into industry, or is it
into
the
industry
pipeline that feeds the military?
Yeah, no, into industry. For example, in aircraft maintenance, we get a lot of our workforce labor that are trained up in the military, and they may potentially serve for 8 years, and then they come out in the civilian sector, and we grab them as quickly as possible. And so with I guess we're particularly tied to your recruitment.
Yeah. Okay. So in general, recruitment for the there are things that affect recruiting for the military. Frankly, the biggest is the economy. When the economy is doing well, recruiting in the military is tough. When the economy is doing horribly, then recruiting goes up. So right now we're having a struggle with recruiting in general in the military. The economy is, you know, there's some indicators that don't make us happy. So we expect that we'll see an improvement in recruiting over time. So that's and the military has incentives that they can use, bonuses and schools and other type of incentives they can use to help, you know, turn the rheostat up and down for recruiting in general. In terms of the pipeline leaving the military going to industry, I can't tell you that we target industries in attempt to you know, have professionals of certain numbers to feed industry. That does not happen. I'm certain it does not happen. But for the professionals we do have, I mean, the professional skills that we have are based on what it is required to fight the war. And so for the skills we do have, for the soldiers, for military in general, all the services do this. We have a pretty robust transition program. And if we do what we say we are supposed to do in our program, then, you know, we start soldiers years out preparing for their transition. We have things that help them with internships. There's programs to help them with college. There's money for college. There's transition services. So I'm not sure. Am I getting to the question, Ms. Johnson, or?
Yeah, I think not being specifically in the recruiting department. I think that was an excellent answer. So next question, what advice would you give leadership employees to take to avoid toxic and tyrannical leadership?
You know, this is really, really interesting. So the perception of, the perception of the success of a leader is very, very different depending on where you sit. So a leader can look to a boss to be a great leader because he gets things done. you know. But to his peers and to his subordinates, he can be a little tyrant. And, you know, the only way the boss will know that is if he looks for it. There have to be mechanisms to look for it. One of the mechanisms is asking. And if you have a team that's built on mutual respect and strong relationships, somebody is going to tell you. Short of that, though, there are other mechanisms. You know, 360 evaluations is a wonderful tool. In the military, we have several tools like this. Typically, when a leader prangs hard right on a 360 evaluation, then his supervisor immediately, radar goes up immediately. And then you need to go and dig in a little bit. You need to pull in some of the key subordinates in that organization and say, tell me what's going on here. Do we have a problem? And typically, you know, subordinates are very, very loyal. They're even loyal to a toxic leader. They don't like to say, yeah, my boss is a little tyrant. But if you remind them that they have loyalty to the larger organization just as much as they have loyalty to that boss who might not be treating people right, then sometimes they're more willing to talk to you about the problems. But yeah, I'd say the biggest piece of advice I have is you have to actively look. You have to actively look. Over.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think the boss of that individual has to be open as well, has to be willing to accept that inquiry, yeah. Correct? So, Lieutenant General, what recommendations, insights would you give to civilian leaders on the benefits of employing veterans, especially female veterans?
Well, we're just wonderful. That's the biggest reason. No. The benefits of employing veterans. When you hire a veteran, I think you're hiring somebody that somebody else paid to train. I mean, let's be honest. There are good people and bad people in every segment of society. So you could certainly, there are certainly some bad veterans, you know. But that aside, I mean, there's bad bankers too, right? There's bad policemen. But they're very good ones in all these segments of our society as well. I think the biggest thing you get out of hiring a veteran, you're hiring someone that somebody else has paid to train. You're hiring somebody. Typically, you're hiring people with some leadership skills and some team building skills, and I'd say those are probably the biggest ones. Do you have thoughts on that, Ms. Johnson?
I think, yeah, I think you really hit it. Is that one of, I think, the absolute benefits is you're hiring someone who's trained. So you know that that person has instilled with work ethic. They're going to be at work on time. You know, they're going to be willing to accept responsibility. They're going to be willing to accept direction correctly. And I know for females, if you look at the percentage of females that serve in the United States military, I think you can definitely make a broad assumption that they're going to have leadership skills. They're going to have been able to step forward and lead in some austere environments. So I will move back though, because I want to ask you the questions. So just a general comment, great insight and feedback. This is kind of a long question, sir, and I have this and one more, and then we're going to let you go. Thank you, General Howard, for your amazing insights and pearls of wisdom. We thank you for your service. Listening to you, I can surely draw many parallels to your combat experience in our corporate domain. We are often caught firefighting and damage controlling on problems, and frankly, we are quite good at it. I love that. We have elite teams to work on problems. I think, I know in my company, they're Tiger teams. Similar to QRTs/SF in the armed forces. And we have teams that work on long-term solutions and future endeavors. What is recommendations guideline for leaders who lead such QRT teams?
People who lead organizations like that in Panasonic, what's my advice to them?
Yeah, probably like separate Tiger team working groups. I'm sorry.
Yeah, for Tiger teams, I would say the value for a Tiger team solving a discrete problem, the value of collaboration across the whole organization is super high. It's also super hard. It takes up time. It becomes this unwieldy problem. But in terms of buy-in and of the solution and getting all the facts, even the bad ones, there's no other way that I can think of that you would do that. So someone put in charge of a Tiger team to solve a monster problem, I would say, cast a web and cast it wide. You know, build a network and use it, and you'll definitely do better. Or at least that's what I've seen in the military with Tiger teams. Did I get to your question?
I believe so. One more question. What values have you tried to instill in your kids, and what advice would you give to young people starting their careers?
What values have I installed in my children? Is that what you ask? And
yes, yes. Literally, let me repeat the question, sir. What values have you tried to instill in your kids, and what advice would you give to young people who are starting their careers?
Yeah. I'd say, first of all, I have 3 children, a daughter and 2 boys. My daughter is perfect. My boys are, gorillas. They're not. Values, I'd say honor is probably at the top of the list. No matter how well you do in life, how good or bad you do, you're the only one that can give up your honor. So I think that's one. I think being selfless is, my daughter's a school teacher. That is selfless work. My son's a soldier. That's selfless work. My 3rd son's in college, so he doesn't work just yet. But I think being selfless, I think this thing of treating people the right way is probably a value I would recommend certainly have recommended. Seeing how kind my children are to their grandfather, who is much older now and struggles with mobility, I can see that they've learned that. And I think for all leaders, teammates will take care of you if they know how much you work to take care of them. They'll take care of the company, the military unit, if they believe that they're the number one priority in your mind. I don't know. That's probably my short list. Open.
That was a great answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. I was just pondering and reflecting on what you said. Sorry. Yeah. And I do want to just acknowledge, Abdul Nouri, I did see your question and I do appreciate your question and it has a lot of value. Unfortunately, the general can't speak to policy decisions, so he won't be able to address that one specifically on Afghanistan. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and just say, I'd like to offer our tremendous appreciation and gratitude to Lieutenant General Michael Howard for graciously giving of his time to speak today to Panasonic. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to learn more about his background leading up to today's event, and humbling to be afforded the opportunity to interview him live during this final stage of just his exemplary career. Also, I'd like to additionally thank the United States Army for allowing this event to take place today, and also to our company's CEO, Mr. Ken Sane, for allowing Panasonic Avionics to host these live events for not only our company, but for all of the Panasonic companies in North America. Again, if you're a United States veteran, please reach out to me directly to self-identify and become involved in our community. And again, thank you to everybody that participated today, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
So thank you personally. I'm grateful that you asked me to participate in this, and thankful to Panasonic Avionics as well. I think the Veterans Business Impact Group speaker business that you're doing is a great thing, and I hope it keeps going. I've found it hugely interesting, and I've enjoyed doing it. So thank you. If anybody, I may regret this because I may not hear from anybody, which will be demoralizing, but I may regret it because I hear from a bunch of you, which will be hard to handle, but that's okay. If anybody listening wants to communicate more with me, I'm open to it. So please connect. I'm on LinkedIn, if you can't find me there, you can maybe Miss Johnston will help you connect. But I'd be happy to hear from you. Other than that, thanks again for having me, and good night.